Welcome to another episode of Practicing with Purpose for Lawyers Only. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and I'm really excited today to be introducing you to Jennifer Justice. If you don't already know her, she is a powerhouse. So welcome, Jennifer. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to be talking today. I've called it How to Be a Game Changer, and that's because, as you're going to hear very shortly, Jennifer is most certainly a game changer in more ways than one. And for those of you who don't know her, Jennifer Justice is known for her expertise in building artist careers and their business portfolios, and she marries art with commerce, which is an unusual combination. And she's also known as a champion for gender equality and diversity in the workplace. And as a social justice attorney for 30 years, that is warms my heart. And Jennifer has also been general counsel and EVP at Roc Nation. So she served as no less than Jay-Z's personal entertainment attorney for 17 years, as well as Beyonce's personal attorney for a year. And then in 2019, she shifted, and JJ, as she's known, founded the Justice Dept. And it's a management strategy and legal firm that works with female and also woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent brands, and creatives to really, to build and maximize their value. So I just love that your name is Jennifer, Justice. How perfect is that to have a career in the law? And I'd be really interested to tell you, I mean, all joking aside, tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, and what made you actually want to pursue a career as an attorney, other than the name, unless you changed your name and it's a
No,
safe.
no, so many people have asked me if I've changed my name. I was like, oh my God, how pathetic would I be if I changed my name to that? No, this is the name I was born with. This is my father's last name. I've never been married, and never wanted to change my last name. So it will always be my last name.
Love it.
Yeah, and became abundantly clear that everyone thought it was very funny when I was in law school. So yeah. But how I, started this journey, is really because I didn't really know what choices I had. My family is not from a higher education family. My mother didn't graduate from high school. Most of my family, that's the furthest they have gotten. Nobody had gone to college. And I, look, every generation is supposed to do better than the last, or, what I mean? Better, meaning,
Yeah.
kind of propel yourself forward more. So that's what I wanted to do. And I decided that I did well in school and I wanted to go to college. And so that's what I ended up doing. But after I graduated college, you get these nebulous kind of, majors, and you're like, what do you do with it? And I decided to major in poli-sci. I'm not even sure why, but I did. And then, next thing I know, I don't really have a career when I leave because so I kind of was like, okay, well, what can I do? What's on TV? I didn't have any mentors. I was like doctor, lawyer,
Yeah.
private investigator, it's like,
Yeah.
so I just chose lawyer because I wasn't finding any real career oriented jobs. And that's what I did. I went to law school, but then I wasn't sure what kind of law I wanted to practice. And given my background of living in Seattle, a lot of bands from there, my love of music, I settled on becoming a music lawyer. And so it's not an easy area to get into, mostly because it's about who you know, and they
Yes.
don't like to hire people. They don't like to train people. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, like how do you get in if you can't be trained? And so I, I basically met somebody who was in the business who referred me. And then I luckily got hired to be a music lawyer, where you represent artists and talent in particular, and all their rights in connection with like doing their music industry deals and the record labels and their songwriting deals with the publishing companies, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. And in so many ways, actually, Jennifer, I feel like a kindred spirit because same, I grew up in a low rental apartment complex. Nobody on either side of the family had ever gotten sort of post-secondary education. And you're sort of looking at those options and feel not too subtly pushed when you do well in school, right? So
Yeah.
I love that. And music industry, kudos to you because that was early. That wasn't something you even heard of in law school, or at least I didn't. They didn't talk about entertainment law or music industry law or anything. So I love that you pursued that. And I want you're being super humble sort of about your background. I know you've been named as a game changer by Goop, by InStyle. You were one of the 50 badass women changing the world in 2020. You're on Billboard's, I think, Women in Power list 3 times, is it? So tell us how that came about. Love to give yourself permission to brag for a bit for us.
No, I don't know how these lists come about, but I think mostly it's like they look at, people doing, unique kind of things, and, kind of standing in your purpose and using whatever power you do have for good, and so, when I launched the Justice Department, one of the things that really surprised me the most is how much press I got on it, because and why is it so unique that I started a law firm and a strategy and management firm where my clients
Yeah.
are 99% women? Why, it just goes to show you that women are not catered to when it comes to
Yeah.
business, and we're not given those tools when it comes to business to understand when you're in meetings, because you get to a certain point, even if you're in marketing or PR or more creative endeavors, if you're headed toward a C-suite, you're going to get in a
Yeah.
room and 90% of what they're going to talk about is the business.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared. And you don't get the preparation when you're in most of the what's quote unquote the women
Yeah.
roles in
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah. Now, was
So,
it an intentional choice on your part that you were going to service women, or did you end up falling into that?
oh no, it's 100% conscious choice. I was like,
Yeah.
men bring other men along. It starts at a very
Yeah.
young age, learning about business and investments and companies and growth and P&L, all starts very young, all that stuff. When women are told, like, oh, money's icky, leave it to the
Yeah.
boys,
Yeah.
just think about your lipstick.
Yeah, yeah. And well,
Yeah.
and that condition, it's one of the things that prompted me to start Women on Purpose because that conditioning runs really deep and not even just in our lifetime, but I don't know what your thoughts are, but I believe it's that generational conditioning, right? It's not that long ago, women didn't have the right to own property or vote or even be recognized as persons in the eyes of the law in some jurisdictions. And I
Yeah.
think that really affects how you believe you can show up, right? And Gina Davis has done some great work, as you probably know, and visibility for women on TV, right? So, and it's interesting that you talked about how much that affected you, TV growing up. I often joke that we should all file a class action suit against LA Law. I don't know if you remember that show, but it certainly misrepresented the glamour of the profession. So, so tell me, how did you find, like, clearly you found success and you found a niche where you were able to really expand quickly. So, what do you attribute that success to?
Well, it's because I was passionate about music, so it helped a lot more. I cared about my clients. I cared about how they were treated. Most of them were from a similar background as me, and so I could relate. So it was like a combination of clients I knew that I could help, that I could add and be an advocate for, and in an area that I was passionate about.
Yeah. And tell me how the transition then, because that's like the music industry is very specific. I get that. You got a passion for music. You're able to get yourself in there, and kudos to you for doing that in an industry that is definitely tough to break into. And then what was the transition to start the Justice Department and sort of marry that, creativity with the business part of it? How did that come about?
Well, I was always doing the business part because, in the music industry, agents do a very specific role in that they book their live experiences. So the lawyer is really an integral part of crafting the business terms with the record companies, sponsorship, endorsements, their publishing deals, et cetera. And if they, in Jay-Z's, instance, starting his own companies. So it was more than like nobody handed me business terms and said, no, go put it in paper. We were part of all of that.
Yeah.
And that's not typical for lawyers. So my
Yeah.
experience was much different than what my title was. And then I realized that it's like, it didn't matter if somebody was a musician, like, of the different entertainment, like music law is the most complicated in that there is copyrights that are
Yeah.
like publishing and stuff. Whereas, you just don't have those same instances. If you're an actor, you don't own any copyrights, right? It's just a negotiation of like fees and trailers and credits and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so if I could do that, then I could really do it for anybody, right? And I could help negotiate, partnership deals. I could help negotiate like, mergers, and I could help, negotiate, when somebody else is doing partnerships, endorsements, like employment, executive agreements, all those things. So it's really about I was doing the same thing. It's just called different things in this
Yeah.
different industries,
Yeah.
you know?
I love it. And let me ask you, and again, you may not want to go there, but as a woman attorney in an industry that I suspect was pretty male dominated, was that ever an issue for you? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, of course it's an issue. It's an issue for every woman, whether or not you want to talk about it or not.
Yeah.
It's an issue because you're the other in the room.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, when you walk in and they're all talking about sports or whatever the thing, and then it's like, even if you cared about sports, which I do not, there's references of sports, there's references of this, there's references like things that men talk about. And because there are differences in how we communicate and fantasy football leagues, whatever, that we're just left out of the
Yeah.
equation. So every meeting was like, I was having two different conversations in my head. One was whatever we were talking about. And the second one was like, did they just talk over me? Did
Yeah.
they just like ask me to go get water for them? Like, you know, did they, you know, it's just like, am I being assertive enough? Am I not being assertive? Or are they listening to me? Why are they talking to my male assistant and not me? You know,
Yeah.
all those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it's so interesting because I mean, that dynamic, I mean, I think every woman in the practice of law and in business generally, frankly, is familiar with that. I mean, for the longest time, I was always the only woman in the room. And we do have that dual dialogue going on in a way that men never have to. I mean, they don't have to think about it because
Yeah.
it's just not an issue. So do you have any advice or suggestions for how to deal, like now with the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you give for young sort of female attorneys coming up the ranks about how to deal with that? In terms of trying to avoid having that sort of split level. Any suggestions you got?
What do you mean? Split level,
Like
like,
where you're constantly having to think on one level, you know, here's my performance as an attorney, and you've got all of this inner dialogue going on. Like, you know, am I being talked over? Do I have to do I have to modify my tone of voice in the conversation? Should I be showing up differently? I know for myself, to be honest, I at the beginning bought into that myth that the only way to be taken seriously was to get a little scrappier. And, you know, for a long time, my clients called me the Barracuda and they meant it as a compliment, but there's a high price that comes when we show up in ways that aren't necessarily authentic to us. So I just wondered from your experience, any advice that you'd have for sort of young female attorneys coming through the ranks about how to deal with that gender issue in the law. Women are leaving the practice in droves right
yeah.
now.
Well, I think that's it. I think the overall issue is to go to a place that you can grow,
Yeah.
right? And if you don't have a choice and you have to take a job, don't try to fit it. Don't try to, you know what I
love
mean?
that.
Just
Yeah.
understand, like, you have to play the game to get to an end result. This is a short-term solution for a long-term game. Okay. Like,
Beautiful.
you got to think like that. This is like a chess match. This is like a baby steps. Like, you know, you might just have to do that. The second you start that job, start looking for the next one. You know what I mean? Like, don't be like, oh, there's something wrong with me, because it's not. It's how the system is built. It's a
Yeah.
patriarchal system. Until we build a matriarchal system that fits for us, you know, and you have to go into that system, use that system for what it has. Use it for its resources, use it for your experience and resume, use it for all the tips that you can get to know how to beat the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Use it for everything. Get the most amount of money you possibly can, because this is not like, you know, women always make the mistake like, well, it's all the money they had. Bullshit.
Yeah.
They can,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
owe them nothing. This is a job,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Beautiful. So
Yeah.
great advice there. I love that. And it's interesting when you say, hey, we're in a patriarchy, and until we build a matriarchy, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are if you've seen a shift sort of with COVID, right? That I feel like people this was a bit of a wake up call and sort of shook people a bit to their roots. And it's interesting that we're seeing people look to sort of female global leaders differently than they would have, I believe, 5 years ago, or, you know, I was going to say 10 years ago, but 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, where there's this recognition of feminine leadership as being an incredible strength as opposed to a liability, whether it's, you know, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, or we've heard a lot of talk about who shows up very authentically and is totally unapologetic about, you know, whether it's daycare, pregnancy, or issues. And, you know, I wonder do you feel that there's a shift that perhaps now is a window where people are open to showing up differently?
I think they have to. I think because men their office switched to their home, they actually saw what was going on.
Good point.
And if they don't acknowledge it, then they're lying,
Yeah.
and I think they finally realized what little work they actually do. Um, the toothpaste doesn't magically appear.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no toothpaste fairy. Like people actually go and buy it. You know what I mean? And if your wife works, I mean, she's doing that as well as the toothpaste, and so I think women also sat there and went, wait, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
It's like, we're just born into this like world where it's like, yay, and then we're going to get married, and I will obviously take his name because it's more important than my name, and I will have a baby, and I do all the work in my body and my brain and everything like that changes about it. But, and the baby will obviously automatically have his last name.
Yeah.
It's like, saying to a gay couple, a couple of mine, a gay couple, I was like, at least you guys get to have a conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a conversation that takes place.
Yeah. I love that. And that conversation is starting. I definitely, I kept my name and the kids are hyphenated after much debate. So,
Yeah.
but I love that perspective you raised. I got to say, Jennifer, I mean, I've been thinking about this shift happening because people were so shaken that they're thinking about things differently, but I never thought about, and you're quite right. It's the practical sort of impact of being at home, being in it, seeing it firsthand. That's an increased awareness. I love that perspective. And I'd love getting a little more esoteric here now as well. I mean, as you know, this podcast is about practicing with purpose and in part, the practice of law. How can we, show up better? How can we, whether in the practice of law or as you found this unique way to express yourself differently, what are some of your biggest fears or concerns or challenges, and how do you address them and move forward?
Some of my biggest fears and challenges. I mean, some of my biggest challenges is I'm still a woman, and like, we might make 80% as white women less than men, down to, 50%
Yeah.
and lower for women of color.
Yeah.
But we probably, when it comes to the wealth gap, it's probably like we have 20% of what men have.
Yeah.
Because over time, all of that impacted, and like we've never created our own wealth. We also become dependent on the wealth of husbands and fathers. And like, if we just aggregated our own actual wealth, it's depressing. Like, so, my biggest fear is that women and men don't take this as serious as it is, because we're 50% of the population. 50% of the population. Yeah. The other 50%, and many of the 50% that are in it, are fine with us being second-class citizens.
Yeah.
And we're 50% of the population, which means we're every race, age, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, socioeconomic background. We cover all of those gamuts. So, you can not be prejudiced against anybody for those things, but you can if you're a woman.
Yeah. Absolutely. And 50% and growing, right? I mean, which is interesting because it, the number, science seems to be suggesting, for whatever reason, we're seeing more girls born than boys right now, which is going to be an interesting dynamic if that continues. So I love that. And again, the second half of that then, so how do you address that and move forward, right? I love
the fear girls that are Gen Z.
Yeah. I love it. There you go. We're on our way. And again, super interesting perspective about the wealth gap, because I haven't thought of that as deeply as I should. You've really invited me to do that, because definitely I've done a lot of research into the gap, as you say, in wages. But you don't think of the long-term impact. It's not just in any given year that you're making less. It's then the accumulated wealth and what you're able to do with that. Men are able to invest that money, and that multiplies and multiplies in ways that women don't have that opportunity. So that the gap starts becoming exponential. So beautiful point. And I love that with women lawyers, it's interesting to me that you would think that lawyers who negotiate for a living, that disparity would be less. And yet it's not. The stats on women in law are the same. I mean, the differential between that partnership equity for women as compared to men, and not only the number of women being less, but the actual income that they're earning in those equity partnerships. So I'd love if you could speak to the art of negotiation, if you will, and how that helps you, what role that plays, both as an attorney and in the practice of law and in life generally.
Well, I think, what you should never do is negotiate for yourself. There's that saying, anyone who represents themselves has a fool for an attorney.
Yeah.
But also, just in general, people always ask me, well, give me 3 tips on negotiating. I was like, the first 3 and only tips I'm giving you are to hire somebody who negotiates for a living. You don't ask somebody, it's like how to be your own publicist. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you won't even hire a social media manager. You hire, like, we don't do our own nails, we don't do our own hair, we don't watch our own kids, but for some reason we're supposed to negotiate for ourselves. No, like, I spent 20 years learning how to do it. Hire me.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what you have to do, because and we also aren't we're not great advocates for ourselves.
Yeah.
So you have to hire somebody to do that. And you should be proud of doing that. Like, this is who is representing me. Talk to them.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. And we don't advocate well for ourselves, which is interesting because women can be incredibly fierce negotiators when they're advocating for others, particularly,
Yeah.
whether it's a kid or someone vulnerable, an aging parent, whatever. But
Yeah.
so
No,
there's, yeah,
that was my, when Jay-Z hired me to come in house solely, he was like, who am I going to hire as an attorney? And I was like, who am I going to hire? He's like, you're going to hire an attorney? I was like, yeah. And thankfully I did. I was going to take, like, I don't know, it was like, much, like, 6-figure number less than what
wow.
my female attorney said
Yeah.
no. And they just said yes to her number. And I was like, Jesus, you know?
Yeah, well, thank goodness you trusted your intuition, right? So
Yeah.
now what about, and you may disagree, but I believe that, and it's interesting because I'm sort of on a mission to reframe negotiation, as you will see. So, because what you're talking about is those more formal negotiations, right? Whether it's a compensation package or those in the business context. But I see all of life as a negotiation, right? Whether you're negotiating with your intimate partner, with your kids, with service providers, you name it. So any tips you would give about those negotiations, the art of negotiation, anything that would help you sort of better negotiate? Like, women don't ask, for example, is one thing. So practice, ask for what you want. Any other suggestions you would have?
I mean, because if you're in a position, I find, because women undersell themselves so much, is to ask them to say, okay, what do you think it's worth?
Yeah.
Like, you tell me the
Yeah.
number. You tell me what you want to do, and then why, you
Yeah.
know, turn it around. Like, especially if you're like, look, I negotiate with my kids all the time.
Yeah.
They are fierce negotiators and it
Yeah.
cracks me up. But, like, I'm just like, okay, well, why do you want that? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Um,
that.
and then, okay, if you can't get what you want, then what do I have to do to get it?
Yeah.
Don't get in a defensive position, like, and not to use a sports reference, like in an offensive one, but, like, think of it more like, don't operate out of scarcity. Like, if I don't do the right thing, I'm not going to get it.
Yeah.
That operate out of abundance. Like,
Yeah. I
what
love
are they
that.
going to do to make it worth my while?
Yeah. I
Like,
love that.
why, what are you going to offer me? Not like what I can offer you.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful approach. I love that. Super empowering, and it reinforces the power of questions, which I'm a big advocate of, right? We
Yeah.
tend to not listen and use the power of questions and get curious, and I love that idea about turn it. What are you going to offer me, right? Come from that
Yeah.
place of high expectation.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So let me, you obviously have chosen a super interesting path, which I love, both even in your sort of traditional law career in the music industry, definitely a different path. But how have you gotten away from, that traditional competitive, potentially soul sucking kind of fight mode of practicing? It sounds like you've really found a way to practice on purpose. So tell us how you
Yeah.
achieve that.
I mean, because I represent women and only women, I know that I'm really helping them
Yeah.
and talking to them in a way that no matter the best intentioned man could ever, because they don't know what it's like to walk in the room and be a woman. They don't know what it's like to be an other walking into the room,
Yeah.
unless they work at Vogue or something, I suppose. But, like, but
Yeah.
usually they're like the people controlling the money. So,
Yeah.
they're probably the boss, but, like, you just don't know. And so it's like, hire women, hire only women, and don't hire women that ladder up to the patriarchy and men. Hire women who have their own businesses, whose whole existence relies on their money, and take their advice and pay them. And when they give you a bill, offer 10% more if you can,
Yeah.
because, it's just, and that's what we do. And it's like, and if you ask somebody for a referral or ask somebody for an intro, or somebody, get you in a position where you make a lot of money, send them a $5,000 bag. Don't, like,
Yeah.
don't think that that's free. Men do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I did deals for men and I got a $20,000 Birkin bag
Yeah.
for introing somebody.
Wow.
as I should have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, give each other gifts. Don't ask for free stuff. You know what I mean? We do free all day long with our kids. We do
Yeah.
free all day long.
Yeah.
Pay women, hire women.
Love that. Great advice. And it ties
Yeah.
back so beautifully to what you were talking about as well. That baggage that we carry around wealth and money, right? That
Yeah.
it doesn't even cross our mind to do that. So I just love that. And as a practical matter, how did you find a better way to practice law, to be able to find that balance, to bring that purpose to your practice?
Again, I mean, what I just said was like working for women, you know,
Okay.
that's really,
Okay.
that's,
So that's
yeah,
the secret sauce.
yeah.
Okay. And would you say as well, is that the thing that's helped you maintain your passion, or do you have any tips for anybody as well about what are some things you can do to keep it alive? Because you said at the beginning, and I think it's pretty universal, most lawyers, not all, but most lawyers, I would say, start because they want to make a difference in the world.
Hmm.
And it sounds like you have found a niche where you feel like you're really making a difference. So any other tips though about how to maintain passion for the practice? Because I think for so many lawyers, they struggle with that.
Yeah. I mean, because, you know, a lot of it, you're representing clients that are not that great and doing
Yeah.
not that great things.
Yeah.
It's true. A lot of the
Yeah.
companies, you know, I worked at a company that represented a ton of insurance companies. It's like, you know, and so you're gonna have to like, you can like make money and do things, especially now, that are great for the world, you
Yeah.
know, and you just got to find it. And it might take a while, but you just got to find it and find out what that passion is
Yeah.
and what you're good at, and marry those two.
I love that. And I think I just want to put a pin in that for people. So for our listeners, our viewers out there as well, like the subtext to that as well is to remember this is something you actually have control over. Because I think a lot of times as
Yeah.
lawyers, we feel like it's outside of our control. You know, we got to get it in step and we've got to
Right.
represent these clients. And even when we hate what they stand for, we hate how they show up, we hate how they want us to show up, and yet somehow we feel that it's out of our control. So I love that. And I think everybody could take some lessons from Jennifer on this point. Find something you're passionate about and know you do get to control the clients that you take. I mean, maybe not really early in your
Absolutely.
career, but take
Yeah.
control over that. So,
Yeah. You eventually will. I remember having this conversation with this male attorney who would, he's much older than me. So he had every ability to take on somebody. And he told
yeah,
me he was representing somebody he has grown, you know, adult daughters, and like that, it's like, oh, you must know XYZ. You know, it's like, well, everyone does in the world
yeah,
because I got taken down in Me Too. And I was like, you know, that's a personal choice
yeah,
right there.
yes,
You're gonna have to live with that. Look at your daughters now that you represent him.
yeah.
He's like, I was like, that's on you.
Oh,
Okay, that's on you.
good for
This is
you.
not your livelihood.
Yeah.
So
I love
yeah,
that. I love that. Take some responsibility for the choices we make in the practice, right? That's
yeah.
beautiful. So, and how do you inspire others to do the same? Or do you do that? Is that something you're intentional about as well,
But
trying to
that's what I'm
inspire?
hoping, like we're doing these things, like these podcasts.
Yeah.
I have my own podcast called Taking Care of Lady Business, where
I love that,
you
by the way.
know, and we, you know, interview a lot of women about these kinds of things, not just inspirational, but like how you do things. You know, it's like, it's just like 101, like
Yeah.
what do you do? How, you know, how do you help women? How does it like give them advice, you know, give them real advice? And so you know, just trying to get the message out there as much as you can, because that was it. Before Me Too, women were kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
this is only happening to me. And
Yes.
it's happening to all of us. And
Yeah.
it's got to stop.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop unless we start banding together and say, it's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Talk about the white elephant in the room. And with that, I love that you've actually gone right there, Jennifer, too, because I think so much of it, you know, I talk a lot about unconscious gender bias, and you know, I've done a lot of speaking on it. And it's interesting because as soon as we talk about, people talk about sort of women immediately, it's like that pointing fingers about unconscious bias or bias generally by men against women. And that's not the case. We don't talk enough as well about bias by women against other women, and even our own internal biases. Because I know
Yeah.
the stats about young women, I don't know if you've seen that study when young women writing their SATs, half the control group were asked to identify their gender in advance of writing the test and the other half weren't. And those who identified their gender actually performed more poorly. Like think about the power of an unconscious gender bias that actually affects our performance and how we show up. So
Wow.
I love that you're doing so much work in this and really practicing it. I mean, a lot of people pay lip service to the importance of this, but you are living and breathing it. So I'd ask, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started, and how would it have helped you?
I wish I knew now the power of what I do in my voice,
Mm,
and and how to harness that power, and how to harness that power financially as well,
mm, yeah.
you know.
And can you tap into that a bit more? Because I think wealth is so taboo. When you say harnessing into that financial wealth, do you mind just elaborating on
I
that a
should
bit
have
more?
made a lot more money than I have.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Like it's ridiculous.
yeah,
Like the amount of money that was paid to people who didn't have half of my skill set. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I wish I would have demanded it. I wish I would have not trusted the people that were my bosses to pay me the right thing. I wish I would have asked for it, demanded it, left when I didn't get it,
Yeah,
just kept moving, you know, and not
yeah.
taking my job so personally, like, oh, it's like my family. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, yeah.
Not.
And I love that you've touched on that about leaving as well, because we don't like one of the most important things in negotiation, know what your alternatives are going in, do your preparation going in, and always have one of your options being the possibility that you might have to walk away to be able to get
Yeah.
what you want, right? So
Yeah.
super powerful, Jennifer. So anything, I can't believe how quick our time is going here. I could talk to you all day about this issue. Anything else that you'd like to expand on, touching on this in terms of a better way to practice, or, something about being able to practice with purpose in life?
No, I mean, I think we touched on so much, you know, and everything that we really wanted to get across. I don't think I minced words. So I'm pretty sure I was clear about that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. And I love that. And I think that's a lesson everybody can take away here as well, because the way you show up, that totally unapologetic, here are my views on this. And this is a conversation we need to start having, right? Not skirting around the edges or nibbling at a little tiny piece at a time, but let's have intelligent dialogue about this. Let's talk about that elephant in the room. So,
Right.
and go ahead. The one question I normally like to end with is, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? Doesn't have to be on this issue. It can be on anything. It can be about how you show up personally, professionally, whatever. What would you say is a mindset shift that changed your life?
Give me an example of a mindset shift.
Like for me, I would say one was talking about like growth versus fixed mindset, right? And I would have always said I was a growth mindset person, but then suddenly I recognized, no, I actually am. There are a lot of chances I probably don't take in life, areas where I could have grown, because I had this expectation that people saw me as the achiever, right? Or being able to do it. So I probably didn't take chances where I thought I'd really fall flat on my face. So that, or the idea that you can control your thoughts, that was a novel concept to me. And that was a huge mindset shift, that like, oh my gosh, I can't blame other people. I'm responsible for the meaning that I
Yeah.
attach to my thoughts.
Right. I think my mindset shift was that I didn't need to be employed by somebody, that I could do it myself.
Yes.
But like, wait a minute, these people decided they could do it. Why are they any smarter or better than me at doing it?
That's gorgeous. And sometimes naivety helps in that. Like I remember when I started my own firm, it was pretty early in my career actually. And I think had I known what I knew 5 or 10 years later, I would never have had the audacity to do it. But I just assumed, everything I've tried before, of course, if I want to start my firm, I can. But I had no credit, no guarantee of clients to come, none of the indicators. But I just had an absolute unshakable belief that I could. And so I did. So
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. So tell us about, for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about you and what you do, where can they go to learn about you, Jennifer?
So they can go to the website, thejusticedepartment.com. It's the justicedept.com. And that's where you can get in touch with us or follow us on Instagram at thejustice.dept.com or at jenniferjusticeleague.com.
Beautiful. And make sure as well to check out Jennifer's podcast, The Justice Department, as well, which I'm going to have to. And what did you say the actual
The
podcast
name
is
is
called?
Taking Care of Lady
I
Business.
love that. That is so perfect. And we'll make sure to put these in the show notes as well. So do make a point of checking those out and support. I mean, I think you've got some great tips from this today, great perspective shifts, I hope, as well. And I'm sure you all got loads of value from the episode. So thanks so much, Jennifer, for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. pleasure. I love everything you're doing and what you stand for. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and for everybody out there, again, this is probably an episode you want to, there was a lot of information packed in there in a short time. So make sure to come back and recheck the episode, share it with anybody who you think could get value from it. And there is loads of value in this episode. And if you haven't already subscribed, please make sure to subscribe, of course, to Practicing with Purpose for Lawyers Only, and share it with anyone that you think would enjoy the podcast. And also make sure to check out my Art of Feminine Negotiation podcast as well. I'm trying to convince Jennifer to do an episode on that as well. I think she'd have loads to share there. But that's a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find a way that you can practice on purpose, and find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle your passion and make a difference in the world while negotiating your best life on your terms. Take care.